Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to Pop Fizz Feed Our Kids. I'm Mari Coyle, Director of Wine at ONEHOPE. If you haven't met me before, welcome to our Grape to Glass virtual online tasting where we can taste together and learn about everything from the grapes to the glass, including the winemaking process. I have to say, I really get excited for every single one of these, but I'm sort of especially excited today because this is so fun. It's such an awesome wine to make and enjoy. It's a perfect time of year, and it's really one of the causes that I just have a big heart for, feeding the kids and providing meals for the kids that are in need. And so it makes me really happy that around the holidays we're doing more of that. So kicking it off here, I'll be presenting our sparkling wines, our California Sparkling Brut, also our brand new Celebration Brut, and our North Coast Brut. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of our sparkling wines and the differences. We're going to taste some, and of course talk about our truffle salt popcorn pairing and taste that and why truffle salt. So lots to learn here. A recording of this presentation will be available in VIA University along with the presentation slides probably toward the end of this week. And I would love to hear from you in the chat box. When I get to a place where I can pause, I'll answer any of your questions that pop up. You do know that you can email me your wine-related questions too. wine@viaonehope.com, and I will try and answer those each Tuesday, typically at 10:30 on Facebook Live. Okay, so join me, check out the Facebook page, and get some answers to your questions during this holiday season where I know you're talking to a lot of wine aficionados and everybody's got some questions about our ONEHOPE wines. So if any of you are just joining, welcome to Pop Fizz and Feed Our Kids. I am Mari. And so today we're going to talk about 3 of our wines, and I'm going to try to do that within the hour. I like to talk a lot about these wines, and there's a lot to know, and I know you guys are going to be asking some great questions. So here we go. Fasten your seatbelts for Pop Fizz and Feed the Kids. So I want to start out here with a couple words that we've been tossing around, and you know, this isn't easy stuff to learn. I've got to say, my very first job as a winemaking intern was at Gloria Ferrer Sparkling Caves. And if any of you are familiar with them, they're the small sort of niche producer from the larger global company Freixenet out of Spain. Freixenet does a lot of cava and sparkling wine from different regions around the world. And so I worked for 2 vintages at Gloria Ferrer and, you know, did everything from sampling the grapes to monitoring fermentations to pressing and making press cuts and all this stuff. And still to this day, there are many things that I can learn about sparkling wine. It's just one of those topics that is really pretty complex. And it's easy to enjoy this stuff, right? But it's kind of hard to understand. So as we go through this, give yourself a break if it's not all coming together quite yet, because we will bring back Champs 101, and we always like to keep talking about this on the Facebook Live page too. So a little Champs 101 here in a nutshell. We've got 2 methods that form bubbles in the bottle, right? That's the mystery. How are these bubbles in the bottle? I love these bubbles. How do we capture them in the bottle? You know, it's like those little phrases, right? You just want to bottle it up, or bottle up that little moment in time, or that little child that's growing so fast. You just want to hold them in there. Well, sparkling wine is one of those beautiful treasures of a wine where everything is just right there in the bottle. It's bottled up. And how does that happen? That's what we're going to talk about right now. So we have 2 methods to get bubbles in the bottle. We've got the Charmat method, and we have what we call the traditional method, which is actually pronounced, hold on here for my French accent, méthode champenoise. Did you guys get that? Okay, so méthode champenoise. Okay, so I actually had to learn how to say that from our French intern when I was at Gloria Ferrer, because I was like, method champenoise, champenoise. And he's like, no. Méthode champenoise. Okay, so we've got the 2 methods, and we can call it the traditional method also, if you're not comfortable with your French pronunciation. And those are really, really different. The Charmat method actually will have a wine going under a second fermentation in a tank. The Méthode Champenoise undergoes the fermentation in the bottle. So, whoa. What is going on? What second fermentation? Is that normal? That sounds strange. Here's what happens. In sparkling wine, you go ahead and you make a base wine, okay? It's typically in Champagne, France, which is actually a location and where Champagne gets its name, and the only place, by the way, that is legally allowed to call their sparkling product Champagne. Interesting, huh? That law actually passed several years ago where California sparkling producers could no longer call their wines Champagne because Champagne said, no, that's ours. We are in Champagne, and it's confusing people when you're saying your product is called Champagne. So that's why we call it sparkling wine. So in Champagne, typically you see Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. These wines are then fermented. So they're harvested very early when the sugars are low, and thus the alcohol will be low in the resulting wine, and the acidity is high, and the grape is fresh, okay? The flavors are really pushing toward that citrus note. We're not getting these complex, more tropical flavors in that wine. We're having a lot of citrus notes, grapefruit. It's sort of a piercing base wine that is made. That base wine is intended to be low alcohol because then we will go through a process called tirage, which is here. This tirage process is where the wines are blended with yeast and now more sugar to initiate a second fermentation. Now, does anybody remember what results from fermentation? Besides sugar converting to alcohol, we have a few other byproducts that we've talked about. And I see somebody in the chat box. Tannins, yes, in red grapes, absolutely. Mary for the win with CO2. Yes, we produce CO2. So we produce the bubbles, but now we just have to capture them. So how are we going to do that? So the Charmat method will actually have that second fermentation occurring in a tank. And then that tank will have a lot of CO2 in it at the end of fermentation, and it will be going to bottle. Okay, it's a great process, and we're going to talk about where it's used and why it's used and how it's used. The traditional method has that second fermentation going in the bottle, okay? Imagine 1 million of these with their own fermentation, okay? So I don't know if you guys have spent time around the wineries and you've seen barrels and wine, and you know that new wine, right? Like fresh wine that was just fermented is kind of cloudy, right? So now what? Now we've got all this cloudy juice trapped in the bottle with our CO2. So then what do we do? The next stage is the most labor intensive and time consuming. So that fermentation will occur depending on the yeast selection of the winemaker and depending on the aging conditions. That second fermentation will actually occur quite quickly. That's not the hard part. The hard part and labor intensive part of Méthode Champenoise is the riddling portion, the riddling and the disgorging. So what happens is if I had this bottle and I had a fermentation occurring inside the bottle, the yeast lees, remember that term from our Chardonnay tastings, the lees, so the sediments of the yeast that are now exhausted that create that awesome creamy texture and very full layered complexity and beautiful kind of brioche aromas. That's all now in the bottom of the bottle, but nobody wants to open the bottle and have it bubbling with all this sediment in it. So a process occurs called riddling. And in that riddling, very slowly, we're talking about years now here, very slowly, the wine will be moved on a rack very slowly and turned until it is in its most upright position. And that has to occur very, very slowly so that the sediment isn't left on the side of the bottle. When this occurs, and you guys might have seen when I was at our disgorging process, did you guys remember when I went live from the disgorging process of the Celebration Brut? Anyway, I was there during disgorging, where now all the lees and sediments are at the neck of the bottle. The neck of the bottle is then placed in a frozen bath, and it's what we call the plug. And that plug is frozen, and then it will go onto a machine that will make it go upright. It has a crown cap, like a beer cap on it. That comes off, and the little plug actually pops out of the bottle. All the sediment gone, and you're left with this beautiful, clear wine. Okay, so then what happens? Yeah, I did say years, and the riddling can take years. And what happens to the plug? You know, the plug is all sediments, so it's recycled, and any wine that's left can be racked off and probably sold if there's enough of it. But there isn't much there. But the bottle will come down in height. So now your fill level's here because you took out the plug, and along with it came a little wine, right? Because that just happens with sparkling wine. When you open the bottle, it's hard for the bubbles not to come out, right? So a little bit of wine comes out and during the disgorging process. And during that time, we actually go ahead and true it up. So that's what we call the dosage right here. And the dosage will be just a little bit of wine and a little bit of sugar, a very small amount of grape sweetness to bring the bottle back to what it was intended to be. And then they go ahead and cork it and cage it and capsule it. And just like this little illustrative, which is from our friends at Wine Folly today, says is, ta-da, there you go. Okay, so let's go back to what makes this a really special process. It's time consuming and it's labor intensive, the traditional method. It also allows for the surface area of those lees, which are very important for long-term aging, to add complexity, to add viscosity and richness to the wine. So when that occurs in the bottle, and that time on the lees that we've talked about with Chardonnay that is so important, that becomes really, really beneficial for adding complexity and driving up the prices of these wines, right? Because they have been stored and aged for a long time. The cuvee is also very important. So, you know, after the first fermentation, a blend is created with the base wines, and that's important because with sparkling wines, there are different what we call press fractions, and I won't go into this too deep because I could talk about it for a couple hours and we got to get tasting here. But essentially, that blend is very important. You use certain amounts of what's called the free run, the juice that is literally just coming out of the juice pan from the whole clusters and the weight of them on top of each other. That juice is very pure, very, very pure. And then different levels of pressing, as the press presses the grapes and the juice out, you get more and more bitter components, more and more skin-like characters. And a perfect cuvee blends the two of those together in a way that the wine is expressed as extremely subtle and elegant, and the CO2 bubbles are really benefiting the flavor of the wine along with the dosage of that small amount of sugar. And we know that that amount of sugar can vary in a lot of the wines, and we're going to talk about that too. So in that aging process, as we go along the bottom here, you have your cuvee, then you do your tirage, you have this aging period where riddling occurs, and it can be 9 months to 5 years, depending on the quality level. So why would someone pay $300 for a bottle of champagne? Well, that champagne may have been 5 years on the lees, that complexity. So the fermentation occurs, the CO2 is in the bottle, and now it's aging on the lees, getting more and more complexity. And that usually comes out in this creaminess and this sort of brioche, almost toast kind of character. It's really, really, really pretty. And then, of course, the dosage is where we true it up to have the right amount of sugar for the taste and for the style, whether it's going to be a brut or a demi-sec. We know all about those. Let's see over here in the chat box before we go ahead and open up some wines. What do you call wines with a little added sugar versus a lot? I know there's a word for it. Yes, we're going to go over that on our next slide, and I hope to answer that, or 2 slides from now. Sparkling wine in mini bottles should be drank sooner than normal. Any time that you have wine in a smaller format, it is not, doesn't have a long shelf life compared to a large format or a 750. So yeah, you should go ahead and enjoy those. You wouldn't want to, you wouldn't want to leave them there for a long period of time. Although, champagne and sparkling wines do have a pretty long shelf life. So I wouldn't worry about it, but I wouldn't age them. All right, everybody with me still? That was really kind of a lot of information. You're still there? Haven't had too much sparkling yet. Everybody's good. Okay, let me see. I have a lot of people's ceilings. Tracy, you're still with me? Okay, good. All right, so let's see here. Now we are going to go to our next slide, which is sparkling around the world. If you guys were in Champs 101 on Facebook Live this summer, this is what I really took a little dive into, is let's talk about the 4 major types of sparkling wine around the world. And that can help us understand all of our sparkling wines too as we taste them. So here we go. French Champagne, that is where sparkling wine really originated, was in Champagne, France. And Champagne is a region inside of France, just like Bordeaux or Burgundy or the Rhone Valley or the Languedoc or Provence, right? We're familiar with Provence. So Champagne is a region where champagne is made from Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot Meunier. And this is the traditional method called méthode champenoise, okay? Then we go to Spanish Cava. Now, Spanish Cava also uses méthode champenoise, but it uses an eclectic mix of white grape varietals. So those are a lot of different grape varietals, and it does use the traditional method, and there can be some quite good Cavas out there, actually, and great values. They're really nice wines. And then we go to California sparkling wine, which can use either méthode champenoise and the Charmat method. So we have both of those here today that we're going to be tasting. And you know what both of those methods are now, and why méthode champenoise is so expensive, or more expensive, because of that lengthy process. And then here we've got Italian Prosecco. Yay, I love Prosecco. Now, I have learned that there is a small region within Veneto where our Prosecco is from, and within that area where they do use the traditional method for Prosecco. So you actually can find traditional method Prosecco, but it is very rare, and it's not as common and it's not in terms of quantity as produced to the extent as the Charmat method is. So that is a common practice in Italy, where for Prosecco, typically the Glera grape is used. It's the typical Prosecco grape. Now, to back up to California sparkling wine, any grape can be used. All grapes are used. So we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. What grapes are used, and how do I know, and why is it important? So I'll go back here, the dosage. That's where it's determined if it's sweet or dry, correct. The dosage amount is what we taste after we've finally tasted the base wines and the second fermentation. And at that point, winemakers line up a dosage trial and we taste where that sweetness level should be. Okay. I know you're calling me out here. Do you want to know why my Celebration Brut isn't in glitter? Because I took it off the line. It didn't have a chance to go to Glitterville. But I want to show you guys something really cool about the label tonight, so that's why. So I had to do it. I'm sorry. I didn't get a glittered one. Okay, so let's go on to our next slide here. The sweetness scale. We've all been waiting for the sweetness scale. It is so confusing without this. So we're going to start with the driest over here on the right-hand side, and that's called Extra Brut. It's pretty rare to see that. I don't see that very often. Then we go to Brut. I think that's the most common. Brut has a residual sugar that is, you know, in a range where it's almost not even noticeable. With sparkling wine, sometimes you can really see that the wine, you know, could be dry. It's just not perceivably sweet, all the way up to where you're actually past the threshold and you can have sweeter style Brut wines. By the way, none of these are legal definitions. So there isn't anything that legally says this is what you have to say as Brut. But everybody just kind of goes along with the tradition that this is the sweetness scale and this is what we're talking about. Then, to make everything really confusing, we get sweeter, but it's called extra dry. I mean, I don't know how to confuse anybody more than that. You just have to like scramble it in your brain. But so we go actually get sweeter, and it's called extra dry. So, okay, we just got to accept that. It's like a flashcard, like which one's sweeter? Just accept it. You know, extra dry, sweeter. Again, I don't see that one as commonly as I do see that a little bit. It's really nice to know if you do see that it's actually sweeter than a Brut, right? Who doesn't want to know that on a wine list or at a store, at a local store? And then we have demi-sec. So our flavored sparklings are in this demi-sec. And then we go to Doux. And I also, again, rarely see that. I think Brut is the most typical range that you see. And we do know that, of course, within Brut, there is a sweetness variation. There are some that are drier than others. Where would competitors be on the scale? It really depends, but the competitor and the producer. But I would say, you know, there's a lot of producers in the Brut area. You're going to see some extra Brut and some extra dry, but the Brut is the most common. All right, let's have some fun, open some wines, and talk about this. So I want to open a bottle. I opened a couple ahead of time so that I could just open one of these with you guys. So if you are looking at the foil, this can be kind of a really intimidating process, right? So if you are looking at the foil, you'll see one little part usually that has a tag on it or a tab where you can actually pull it. And that's what it's meant to do. You don't have to get all crazy and like get your scissors out and rip everything. There should be like a little, you know, cut where you can actually take the capsule and foil off. So having said that, I'm going to make a mess here by taking this off. And so you take that off, and then you've got the cage. And the cage right here, of course, has this little wire that's wrapped, and that's for safety. There's a lot of pressure in this bottle, okay? You guys know that. It's dangerous, actually. There's so much pressure. So I get a lot of times people saying, but how do I open it without making a big mess? How do I open it? What if it does, you know, what if I take the cage off and I can't get the cork out? Has anybody tried that, where you take the cage off and then the cork's kind of stuck in there and you're just left to figure it out? So anyway, what I like to do is hold the top of the bottle with the cage on and take your wire cage and, you know, go ahead and loosen the grip that it has when it's on there and it's tightened up like that. So you loosen the cage. Now the cage could come off easily, right? But we're not going to take the cage off. And we're going to keep our hand on this so that our eyes don't come out, or we don't, like, you know, hit our kid in the face or grandma over Christmas. And then we take our towel, okay? This is my little pro tip for you guys, is always have a tea towel around. I'm sure you always do anyway, because wine can get messy. But take your little tea towel that you have in your tasting box that just kind of goes with you everywhere. And now put that over. And now you've got the cage on here. And you've got a grip on the cork now, because the cage is actually helping you grip the cork. Now, if you want to open this properly, like, you know, Psalms are trained to do, you really don't want it to make a sound. Well, I mean, that's not very fun, but I'm just saying, if you're somewhere that's like really formal, or you're at a golf club or something at a tasting, and you're just like, I don't know why everybody's looking at me, I'm just popping these bottles, what's the big deal? You know, it is the best part. I agree, but I just want you to know that, you know, some etiquette says that it should make very little noise. So you be the judge. Anyway, I agree. I like it, getting it popping too. Get this party started sound, exactly. So we will do that, but I want to show you also another way to do this. This is sort of like, you know, the sophisticated way that I just need to show you, so that I said I showed you. And so you're gonna take hold of that. You've got your towel on, so there's no mess, no corks are popping anywhere where they're not wanted, and you're just going to slowly twist. And that slow twist, and that was pretty loud. I tried. And then you're gonna take it off, and there you go. It's open, okay? Let's get this party started. I need to see some glasses up in the air. Cheers. Okay, time to celebrate. So that's my trick and tip. Even if you want to make a loud noise, go ahead and do it. But I really like using the towel and keeping the cage on, so I keep things safe, under control, kind of like that, you know, keeping things under control. So let's go ahead and look at some of these flavor descriptors. And let's start with our California Brut. Now, how to pour a glass of bubbles without it going over. You guys know about like the little teaser pour? So you just pour a little bit in everybody's glass. So if you've got a tasting that you're preparing for, and you want everybody to have a greeting glass, and you're trying to fill them all up at the same time without making a big mess, you can go around and just do a really small, what I call the teaser pour in the bottom. And that sort of allows the glass to have some liquid in it, so that when you go ahead and fill the glass, it's not going all over, okay? It's kind of more controlled. So I'm using a champagne flute tonight. This is a flat bottom champagne flute that I like for the holidays. You don't have to drink champagne or sparkling wine out of a flute. In fact, you can drink it out of any glass that you want. The flute was designed so that you could actually see the bubbles going up, because the bubbles are a mark of quality. We know how much effort went into producing these bubbles, right? So we're gonna show them off. So that's really great. And then also for temperature. The long vertical position allows the wine to stay at temperature and stay cooler. And believe it or not, these gases are more soluble. I'm using a technical term, so hold on, I'm gonna translate. But they're more soluble, or they stay longer in the liquid at a colder temperature. All you need to know is you've got more bubbles for longer at a cooler temperature. And that's why, my friends, the champagne bucket, right? You can use the champagne bucket, pop your wine in there, keep it cold, okay? Because there's nothing worse than warm champagne. It's one of those things I really can't budge on, right? Like, I can chill down Pinot Noir, I love it. I can have rosé at room temperature or cold. I can do a lot of things that are unconventional, but warm champagne, no. Just can't do it. So use your champagne bucket if you have one. And then I like these little champagne stoppers. If you like to enjoy sparkling wine over the holidays, or you've got several tastings coming up, I like this champagne stopper. It actually keeps the bubbles in. So like this weekend, when I get back home, I can enjoy a glass that I opened today. So pretty cool stuff. So just a couple little tips for you. So the California sparkling wine, this is one, if not our best sellers. It's in our top 3 best-selling wines. I know you guys love it. It's an amazing cause. And and sparkling wine is also really different experience than the typical swirl, smell, and sip, right? Hard to swirl in this glass. Can we all agree on that? Like, not gonna try. But you're using the CO2, the bubbles coming up, to lift the aromas, okay? So here you are, and you can smell this wine. So a lot of these flavor descriptors that are right in front of us, a lot of green apple and lemon, some pear. I think this wine has a lot of tropical notes to it too. That's one of the things I really like about our sparkling brut is the tropical notes. So you can smell the wine without having to swirl it. So now you're just 2 steps until you're sipping it, and then you can sip. So now what happens is you really get to see how that acidity is matched with the sweetness and how the flavors and the bubbles affect the textures and the taste of the wine, right? So those bubbles become really important. They're part of the sensory tasting experience in sparkling wines, where it really releases a lot of flavor. It gives you this slightly more acidic kind of character. So it's very bright and pretty and just really light and festive. That's what I really like about the sparkling brut. Is our California sparkling brut is very clean. We're using the Charmat method here. We're using a blend of white grapes from throughout California. So we're sourcing grapes from throughout California to make a consistent blend every year. Those grapes are not specific. They're not specified. It's white sparkling wine. And that's typically how we describe this wine is easy to drink, perfect for all occasions, really tropical, and also, very just refreshing. The bubbles are great quality. There's a lot of lasting bubbles. It doesn't just sort of go flat right after you pour it. There's still lasting bubbles. So that's an indicator of great quality. And it's really refreshing, really fresh, perfect, just kind of perfect, right? So I want to talk about the California brut. It is in our brut scale on the sweetness scale. However, this is on the sweeter side of our sweetness scale. It doesn't taste sweet to me, but it is on the sweeter side of brut on the tasting scale. It is sweeter than the next 2 wines that I'm going to pour for you, okay? And I started out with it because you know how I like to go from, California to the tighter Appalachians, and that's what I'm going to do with you guys tonight as we go to North Coast. So California brut, cheers. Anybody have some questions or comments about this? I heard that you turn the bottle, not the cork. Is it weird to pour the bubbly like a beer? No, it's not weird. And you can do that, absolutely. You can tilt the glass and pour the bubbly any way you want. There's no right or wrong. It's perfectly normal and acceptable to just get it in the glass and get it in people's hands. And you turn the bottle, not the cork. That's true. So when I had my hand on the cage, I was turning the bottle. So that's a good call right there. That is what I was doing. Is you want to hold on to that cage, and then you can turn the bottle. It'll kind of work once you have it all in your hands and you figure it out. Some tricks on how to get champagne stopper off easily. Ooh, I have not had problems getting my champagne stopper off. The one that I have has hinges, and I push down on it. I guess that's my trick. I push down on the stopper and lift the 2 hinges, and then it comes off. So it will tighten and make a seal on your bottle. You do have to push that down to release the stopper hinges. Okay? Perfect. All right. So let's taste our truffle popcorn. And why did I pick truffle popcorn? Well, champagne and French fries is like the French bistro food, you know, that is so delicious. And it's so funny, right? Because you think French fries, like some kind of fast food, easy accommodity, what am I saying? A comedy. And then you have, you know, something that's very complex, very rare, and oftentimes very expensive. And somehow these two work. Well, salty goes great with bubbles, okay? That's where we go with this, is salt and bubbles are a really good pairing. So French fries are perfect. I can't make French fries at home very easily. At least they're not the really crispy ones like they have at the French bistros sometimes, the frites. And so I just did popcorn because that's my go-to. But I added the truffle salt. So we did the popcorn with a little bit of grapeseed oil. That's my favorite to add. It's really light and it's not buttery and it's not heavy, but it does keep the salt or whatever seasoning and flavor. Plus it kind of brings it back to the grape with the grape seed here. A really neutral oil. It's also really healthy for you. So that's why I like that. And then I used truffle salt that I got from a local spice shop. And this is Italian black truffle sea salt. Now, a black truffle sea salt, if you haven't had it before, is like umami. It's very rich and complex in flavor. It's also salty, so pairs perfectly with the bubbles. But you get that earthy, really intense, rich flavor from the truffle that's really complex, and it works with the acidity, the citrus, the brioche of the sparkling wine. So that's why I picked that. But of course, when we're pairing our wine and food, we take a little sip of our wine, a little bite of our food, and then another sip of our wine and see how those flavors work. This is a dangerous combination for me, I can say, because I mean, I could sip and eat this combination like all night, right? I'm not going to, but I could. So a sip of that citrus, that refreshing, you know, citrus and a little bit of green apple. And then I have the earthy, salty flavors of the truffle. You could use truffle oil too if you wanted, and then add some salt. Somebody's out of popcorn and wine. That's because I'm talking too much. And then when I taste the wine again, wow, it really comes to life. That's what I love. A lot of our wines are really fruit intense. And when we pair them with earthy flavors, that fruit just kind of pops and explodes. So if you guys are looking to put together just a quick event, a quick tasting event, somebody says, oh my gosh, I want to do ONEHOPE Wines, my holiday party, but my budget's maxed out like everybody's is this time of year. And, you know, I just had an open house and I spent a bunch of money on food. I just want to do something simple. This is my go-to. So you can have different flavors of the popcorn, and we're releasing that list really shortly for you guys to have all the references for the different popcorn pairings. And it's just really easy because it's just something light. It's different than a cracker. It really requires very little preparation and it's very inexpensive. The truffle salt is probably the most expensive thing that we've done all year. So really easy to do. Plus I heard that, you know, popcorn is really trending now. I don't know. I guess we're trendsetters here at ONEHOPE because I don't know if that's true, but everybody's saying that, you know, farm to table restaurants have like popcorn out on them. So we've got a trend here. Let's keep it going and we will go to the next wine. And I'm gonna have to use my champagne bucket here. All right, so our next wine, super excited to try this with you guys. This is our Celebration Brut, okay, our brand new Brut. And one thing I wanted to show you about this is sort of a behind the scenes look at our innovation and how exciting a lot of our packaging has been. This wine will be glittered. So each of these bottles after the bottling process will be glittered. I don't have it without glitter. The only reason I had this was because I had to take it off the bottling line so that I had a sample. So I don't have it without glitter, but I can share with you that what we do is send this to Glitterville and it's glittered And then there's a little clear plastic piece here that comes off and exposes a clean label. So if you guys have ordered this and you have it in your hot little hands and you take a look at how clean the label is compared to maybe some of the other glitter bottles that you've received or seen, it's really, really awesome. So that's a new innovation that ONEHOPE has been working on. Stefan has been working on that to get this to you guys so that it's really beautiful and a really great package. And it does that on the front and also on the back. So a really cool process. Here we go from the Charmat method to the méthode champenoise. The traditional method is used. And this time, not a lot else has changed, except that we've added some more Chardonnay grapes into the white wine blend. So this white wine blend does include Chardonnay grapes. It's a proprietary blend of California grapes, much like our California Sparkling Brut, but this time we've added Chardonnay into the mix as part of that blend, and we've used the traditional method. So this fermentation occurred in the bottle, right? So I'm gonna let you in on a little secret on this one too. On our sweetness scale, this is closer to a Champagne Brut. If you have a Brut from Champagne, this is very close on the sweetness scale of that champagne. So you're going to be in the lower area here. It's drier, it has less sugar than our California sparkling wine. So this is a great option for somebody who loves the glitter bottles and wants, you know, a special gift, but they want a quality upgrade. They want to have it be a little drier and they want a little more complexity, okay? That's what's found in this wine because we now have had contact on those lees for several months during the process of aging and riddling before disgorging this wine. So I know you guys are going to ask me, how long was this? And this was about 10 months that this was on the lees and until it was disgorged. And I'm seeing some good notes in the chat box. People really like this. I know this is what I was serving at my Thanksgiving table. It's really one of my favorite sparkling wines that we have. So I'm glad to hear you guys like it. Does anybody else have the Celebration Brut with them? Can you raise your glass if you do? Just wanted to see how many people have tried it. A couple of you. A lot of no cameras tonight. Everybody's wrapping gifts and placing orders while they're listening. So, okay, let's try this together. So we don't have to swirl, but we can pour it in the glass and notice, you know, the quality of the bubbles. Now these bubbles tend to be from the Charmat method. The méthode champenoise tends to have maybe even like smaller bubbles, and it also has a term called the mousse, which is like this sensation of the effervescence on your palate, sort of that texture and the bubble size. That's all graded for quality, if you can believe it. Can get very, very intense in terms of judging wine for a sparkling category. So this wine to me doesn't have all that tropical, like lively, come get me kind of citrus. It's just a little bit more of the green apple. I would say even some of the pear comes in. So it's kind of that lush green fruit flavor. And I get a little bit of the brioche. So just a little bit of that texture that's kind of, it's a little bit creamy, but it's also kind of has that bread character from being on the lees. It finishes really clean. It seems dry, so it's a great pairing for, you know, the popcorn where you've got the salt, and it really sort of works with that. Salt is perfect for sparkling wines. It's just a really great pairing, and you can get creative from there on all kinds of salty treats that you guys like. But I really love this wine, and it is just that one more step of quality, so by changing the method. And it is also encompassing some Chardonnay grapes in the blend. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands the differences of those two wines. So now we're going to go to our ONEHOPE North Coast Brut. All right. I also really like this one. So you can pour like a little teaser if you want, and then pour a little more, and it doesn't bubble up quite as much. Or like Lori was suggesting, you know, you can pour it like a beer. There's nothing wrong with that either. It just kind of requires two hands. But yeah, you can pour these any way that you want. So the North Coast Brut now takes it one appellation further. We are now still with the traditional method, so we're using Méthode Champenoise. On the sweetness scale, we're also in line with that drier side of Brut, okay? So on our sweetness scale, we're on the drier side of Brut, more like, you know, not quite over to extra Brut at all, but we're on the drier side between Brut and extra Brut, right there in the sweetness scale. So very similar to Celebration Brut in terms of sweetness. And then we have now used consistently the traditional method, and now we've gotten tighter appellation. So now instead of sourcing from throughout California, we have actually sourced from just the small area of the North Coast. So you knew I was going to get these guys out, but here we are with California. If we were sourcing from California, we'd have one of these large dolls, right? It's a large geographical area called California, and that is where we are sourcing for our California Brut and the Celebration Brut. When we get to the North Coast Brut, we get a little bit smaller, okay? This is the North Coast. Hello. North Coast. What is the North Coast actually designated as? Well, it's Sonoma, Napa, Lake, and Mendocino counties, okay? Those are the counties in the North Coast Brut. So now we've got this tighter appellation. We know the North Coast is, for the most part, pretty cool climate compared to the entire state of California. And this again is a white wine blend that has some Chardonnay blended. It's white wine, but as many of you know, in the North Coast, the white grapes that are planted are predominantly Chardonnay. But this blend would change from year to year to be consistent with the style that it matches. So we'll go ahead and taste this. And someone asked, how long is the North Coast Brut aged? It's actually aged just a couple months longer than the Celebration Brut. And I really picked that up in the nose. If you have the North Coast Brut and you're comparing it to either one of our other wines, you can really smell that baked bread, that fresh, sort of creamy character, like French toast, but without the cinnamon and vanilla to kind of distract you. It's that really pretty sort of character, and that's what oftentimes the lees will do. But the big difference is going to be the texture on our palate. So let's try that. Wow, really intense and rich flavors. We've gotten a little bit more complex than just the really bright tropical fruit and lemon and green apple. I would say with this wine, we're much more into the pear characters, and there is some citrus there, but we're kind of more complex flavors and into that kind of really pretty green ripe pear, which is just a little bit more complexity, and also adding that brioche, that lees character, that creaminess that happens on your palate. It's almost like there's more viscosity. So what's viscosity? That's those jars that I've showed, which have like water and honey. And so honey is very viscous. So this would coat your mouth more like honey than water. Okay, it's not quite honey, of course, but it's more viscosity, more richness, more mouth coating than maybe the other two. So that's that time in the bottle, and that's that tight appellation of cool climate grapes with a lot of Chardonnay. So that's the result that you get. We're getting really close to being perfect with truffle salt. This is a great wine with truffle salt because it also has those rich notes that pair kind of, just a lighter, more like yellow kind of fruit. And that really pairs well with the truffle. So let's try that. Oh, I got a lot of truffle salt too. Thank goodness. I kept dumping it on more and more. This really makes the wine seem complex. The truffle salt, is anybody else having North Coast Brew? It really adds complexity to the wine. Don't you think? This wine becomes serious. Like, let me do a double take. What is this that I'm drinking right now? It just adds to that complexity and array of flavors. Really good. Really great wines. And I did bring the Shimmer Brut because I had one. And this is the Shimmer California Brut. If you guys haven't seen it, super pretty. I want my whole house to be covered in glitter bottles because they're so awesome. I love them. So any questions on the wines, go ahead and pop in the chat box. I want to take you now to the glossary of terms that we talked about tonight. We went over a lot of information. It doesn't always stick. Like I said, it took me a few years of working with sparkling wines to really understand all the terminology and exactly when everything happened, and I'm still learning all the time. So, méthode champenoise is the method to produce sparkling wine where second fermentation occurs in the bottle. We have two, actually three of those wines. We have the North Coast Brut, the North Coast Rosé, and the Celebration Brut. Okay, so three traditional method sparkling wines. The Charmat method is producing the sparkling wine where the second fermentation occurs in tank. We have two of those. We have the California Sparkling Brut and the Italian Prosecco. Okay, what's Prosecco? It's the Italian sparkling wine made using the Charmat method. And this is typically from the Veneto region in the northwest corner of Italy. That's where most of the Prosecco comes from. And it's just really been so popular worldwide. They're really doing well in Italy with Prosecco. Before we go further, I want to answer this very critical question. What's the key difference between North Coast and Celebration? North Coast is sourced from the North Coast smaller appellation. Celebration is sourced from California. So you have a tighter appellation, but you have two méthode champenoise, okay? They aren't the exact same juice, of course, because they're sourced from different places. So the quality can be often assumed that in a smaller region, you have, more exclusivity in type of grapes. And certainly the North Coast produces some excellent sparkling wines. So that's your key indicator, is that, that North Coast is a great appellation. And within that are 4 different counties that make great sparkling wines. Cava, you learned, is the Spanish sparkling wine made from the traditional method, méthode champenoise. Champagne is not just what you call sparkling wine, right? It's a region in France where sparkling wine called Champagne is produced, okay? And they grow 3 key wine grape varieties there, which are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. And if you guys were here for the Burgundy tasting, for our Chardonnay tasting, you know that Champagne is part of Burgundy, right? It's the part where they produce the sparkling wines. And in Burgundy, of course, they produce Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. White Burgundy is Chardonnay, red Burgundy is Pinot Noir. But you guys already knew all of that. Sparkling wine. Wine with CO2 resulting from the secondary fermentation, right? So now you know why we want to harvest those grapes at a lower sugar early, right? We harvest them at a lower sugar so we get a lower alcohol, so that when we do our secondary fermentation, there's room for just a little bit more alcohol, right? Without being too high and too over the top. They're really balanced wines. Tirage, that's the winemaking process where we add the sugar and yeast to the base wine for the secondary fermentation. The time between the tirage and disgorging is that aging time. During that aging time, riddling occurs. And riddling is the technique that is very labor-intensive winemaking process in which the bottles are slowly moved to a vertical position, allowing the fermentation sediment to deposit at the neck of the bottle. And then we go into disgorging. Disgorging is that next process where we freeze the neck of the bottle. Remember this. So we freeze the neck of the bottle, develop a plug, that's then released, and the wine is clean and clear inside. We true up the fill height, and we add any desired sweetness as part of the disgorging process, okay? That's the dosage. The dosage is that level of sweetness. So then the wine is corked, caged, foiled, and ready to drink. So I'll answer a couple more questions here. The celebration sweeter than North Coast, or are they about the same dryness, if that's a word? It is. Dryness is a word, and they are about the same. They're in that mid-range of brut, where our California sparkling wine is going to be at the higher end range of the sweetness scale than our brut. Is disgorging done manually or machine? Disgorging is done by a machine now. There's a lot of really great machines that sparkling producers use. That's been technology that's gone crazy. And Lori is loving the celebration. I am too, Lori. I love it. So help end childhood hunger. This just always hits me. I don't know why. I think it's just I have just a soft spot for these kids, and just having a basic nourishment just seems like something they all should have. And it makes me just, really, really heartfelt about this cause. And it makes me so happy that all of our sparkling wines go to this organization, which is so amazing. They are our leader in building the movement to end hunger and poverty by connecting people with nutritious, affordable food and by supporting grassroots solutions. To the date, this is probably a little bit before Black Friday, I think. So before Black Friday, at some point, ONEHOPE has provided almost 2 million meals to children battling hunger. And if you guys weren't at Crush and haven't seen the Why Hunger video, it's just remarkable about the things that they do and things that I never thought of, like packing backpacks for kids to go home on the weekend, because while they're at school, they have meals and they're able to eat like at the free or reduced lunch program. They can eat breakfast there. The teachers might have some snacks too. But when they go home, that's when they don't have the food available to them. So Why Hunger will actually pack backpacks up for weekend meals. And they also do a lot of summer programs when kids are out of school. Again, the families don't have the resources to provide these healthy, nutritious meals. And so that's another time when kids are really hungry. And then, of course, holidays and holiday breaks. There's just so much that we can do and that ONEHOPE is doing. That's really amazing for these kids. Again, my heart, it just kind of really chokes me up, because it just seems like something so basic, and yet it's not for everybody. So Anyway, amazing cause for these wines. It's certainly that season of giving and giving back, and that's what's so great about being here with all of you. And I wanted to also just mention, if you have any other Q&A in the chat box, I've already gone over. I'm sorry. I know some of you probably have to get going on to your evenings. But I thank you for uncorking change with me this evening. This is the last virtual tasting of the year. It's been my absolute pleasure to be working with you in this community, and I hope that you've all learned a few things about our wines this year. And I've got more great stuff for you starting up in January. Our next online tasting will be January 16th. We're going to be featuring our 2912 dessert wine with a little winter warm-up boot camp. Little winter warm-up with the dessert wine, a wine boot camp where we can kind of get energized and restarted for the new year to come. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to be looking for some boot camps after the first of the year. So I hope that you'll join me for that and have a very happy, happy holiday. Please remember to enjoy our wines responsibly and enjoy this season with your friends and family. Thank you for all that you guys have given to ONEHOPE this year, and I look forward to seeing you back here in 2018. All right, cheers, everybody.